hello. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good morning. So
Did you see Kraut's new video on
for
China?
the
It's the best
last
one
minute,
on YT in my opinion.
For the wait, I'm sorry. Wait,
one more minute of morning, I guess.
one more minute of morning. Well, not for
Yeah,
gamers.
yeah.
Okay, morning
I know
goes until
that's
like
true.
3 or 4 p.m. All right.
That is true. That is true. I wish I had more time to play games these days.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
33.
33. Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually a bit of a fan. I actually have seen a lot of your stuff before, so it's cool to actually sit down and chat with you.
Oh man, a lot of my stuff in what context?
Oh well, I mean, I saw anything like political, the things you go against Hassan and things like that. I
Hmm.
find entertaining, so I like to see what you have to say. I think it's good to hear.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Well, we
yeah.
have Let me get a little more information. Is there like a main like Twitter handle or something, or like what?
Yeah. Twitter. It's Jose Caballero SD. That's the Twitter handle.
Okay. Is that like the main social media you'd like promoted, or?
That's the main social media like promoted. Yeah. Like screw Facebook.
Really?
Yeah, Facebook is all right. Like I like my personal, like I don't use the personal page that much. I
Hmm.
use my campaign page, but Twitter, I mean, Facebook is so bad for mental health. I mean, you're just fighting with your friends and family. Like, why do you want to do that all day? You
Sure.
know?
Yeah, I didn't know how important Twitter or Facebook was still for like political outreach, so I was just curious.
Yeah.
A lot of people,
Well,
especially older
it
people.
does help with like scheduling canvases and events like that. But outside of that, it's just drama all the time.
That's very true. Although, what
Yeah.
social media platform isn't drama, right?
Right, exactly, exactly. At least Twitter, you got a bigger, wider audience you can reach,
Sure.
in my opinion.
Okay. Do you want to? So we're starting. Introduce yourself. Let people know who you are, what you're about, and then we will have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Jose Caballero. I'm running for Congress in District 53 down in the San Diego County area in the state of California. And I am running as an unapologetic progressive. I'm a veteran, and I'm pushing really strong policies such as Medicare for all with the elimination of private health insurance, education for all, student loan debt forgiveness, bringing the troops home with dignity. I'm actually pushing a particular policy called the Hero's Promise, which is a very, very important policy, and I've been running since March. I actually ran against Susan Davis when she was still running as the 20-year incumbent, and we feel that our policies were pushing her too far to the left, more than she was comfortable, and I think she just saw the exit door and went ahead and jumped out of the race. I'm originally from the state of Texas. I was born and raised in poverty, and I was actually a very strong conservative back then, a Catholic conservative. It's probably one of the reasons why I joined the military in the first place, wanted to serve my country and get out of my hometown. But the war and everything that I witnessed, I was a reactor operator, and as a kid, I was somebody who was like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to fight for my country and operate reactors. But when I was serving, I saw the horrors of war. So when I was, just operating a reactor panel like Homer Simpson, I could hear the jets taking off the top of the carrier. And then during that watch, that evening, we went and watched Captain's Call, which is like a closed circuit TV that you're supposed to watch.
Hmm.
And the air boss comes on and he's like, we got some great footage to show you. We're going to put warheads on foreheads. We're going to blow up some ragheads today. Let's show you what you've done today. And all of a sudden they showed this grainy footage of these, Afghanistan people walking on these mountain passes. And then you just see the bombs blow up these people.
Yeah.
I was horrified. I was horrified because I was like, how do I know there wasn't kids in those caravans? How do I know those weren't innocent people? So it really gave me pause and really started to make me reevaluate what I was doing in my life and what my value set was.
Hmm.
So once I left the military, went to San Diego State University, got my political science degree with an emphasis in philosophy and American politics. And that really changed the trajectory of where my life was headed, and then it basically shifted me from that conservative mindset to where I am now, that progressive, Bernie crap mindset that I am today. And since then, I've been, I ran for San Diego City Council in 2016, and I also own my own company that's been in business for over 3 years, running dozens of canvassing operations and field campaigns across the county, even one in Connecticut for a governor race. So I've been very fortunate to be able to be in the community and develop and, create the infrastructures required for me to actually have a viable chance to run for Congress. Being the founder of the San Diego Progressive Democratic Club, is one of the largest clubs in the county, and also a member of the Central Committee, member of the State Democratic Party. I've really fought to get into those positions because I tell you, they didn't want me there. But I'm there, and we've done a lot of work there. So that's my quick introduction. So if you want to know more, I can.
Okay, yeah, cool. I'll just ask you random questions 'cause I'm curious.
Yeah.
Firstly, if you don't mind me asking, what is your background, like your ethnic background?
Oh yeah, I am Latino. So my grandfather's Puerto Rican, my grandmother is Panamanian, my grandfather was Mexican, and so was my grandmother. So
Are you is your family conservative too?
Most of them are, yes.
Okay.
My mother does like to call me and rant about Trump because she hates him so much, but she usually votes the way I ask her to because she loves me. So she's like, okay, my son knows what he's doing. So
Gotcha.
But other than that, everybody else is pretty conservative. Yeah.
Okay. I'm only asking because my background is eerily similar in some ways. I grew up, my mom's side of my family is Cuban, and she is very Republican, and I grew up in like a Catholic school, Catholic grade school, Jesuit high school, and then very Republican up until I was probably about 17, 18, and then pretty conservative up until I was like 22, 23, and then I
that's about me too.
Yeah, moved to the left. After you have so many experiences, after a while you kind of realize, like, I don't know, it seems impossible to stay on the right too much, but
yeah, absolutely.
What and then obviously you don't have to get too specific. Were you like Air Force, Army?
I was Navy.
Navy. Okay.
Yeah. I was on USS. I was on the USS Ronald Reagan, which is the flagship of the U.S. Navy. It's a carrier. Okay. And I was on board that ship for 4 years. I did nuclear power training for 2 in Charleston, South Carolina. So that was my naval career for 6 years total. Gotcha.
I imagine with your family being conservative, with you joining the Navy, doing the whole military thing, has there been like a lot of friction with your family now that you're kind of like a Bernie Democrat? Is that like really hard to deal with, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, I think the most friction comes from my brother-in-law. Yeah. He's definitely a oorah Trump supporter. And I will say that because my father is a detective in small town Texas, I think a lot of the friction comes on like my stance on what the militarization of the police is doing to our country, as well as the fact that we shouldn't have guns in the hands of everyone, which he agrees with, because he's like, yeah, I'm a cop, I don't want criminals that have guns. So he definitely is kind of in agreement with the banning of assault rifles. But overall, there was a rule for a while at my home when I went home to Texas, is we don't talk politics. But that didn't really work well for me, because it was like, then what am I going to talk about? It's my life.
Sure.
He's like, do you not want to know anything that I'm doing? So slowly but surely, I've been getting into their heads, and like my dad, he's not going to vote for Trump, right? That's a big deal. My uncle, who is this very wealthy lawyer in Texas, he's also not voting for Trump. So something is starting to move, and I think they're starting to be like, well, politics sucks and the parties suck, let me just listen to what the issues are. And I think their ears are starting to open up more.
Okay. What you said, you own a company, and then you mentioned canvassing and stuff. Does your company do like political work, or what is your company?
Yeah. So my company is a political consulting company that focuses on field. So we're specialized in field. So, for example, I guess the best way to do it is explain the product. So what we do is we actually vend door knocks. So, let's say you're a candidate and you want to knock on a universe of like 10,000 doors, because, that's the voter universe that you're working with. I can then, you come up with the formulas and how much the price is going to be for this many canvassers that are paid a $15 minimum wage with, a yard sign, a door hanger, and a T-shirt, and then I can basically price it down to the door knock how much it's going to cost you. So that's what we do. So people buy door packages from us, and then we go and we knock those doors with intention to get candidates elected.
Okay.
So that's yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Before we get into policy things, I'll ask a couple of electoral questions because I'm curious.
Sure.
I tried to look up polling data for the district. Have there been any preliminary polls that have come out yet?
Nothing public, but I have seen some private polls that were done because, this is just a crazy race. And right now, accordingly to that poll, I am at a statistical tie with the council president, who is also running in this race. So it is what I've gleaned from this information is that it's a 3-person race between the oligarch Sarah Jacobs, who is the billionairess, that's the heiress to the Qualcomm fortune, and the establishment pick, which is the council president, and then me as the progressive, right? Because this is the most progressive district in the entire county. There's five representatives for the county of San Diego, and this is the most progressive. Just to put it in the context, 48% of this district went to Bernie Sanders in 2016. So it's very, very progressive, and it's very, very young. Out of all the other districts.
This is something I've never thought about before, but when you look at these districts that are like very, very, very blue or very, very, very red, do you have like, this might be like way out there, but do you have like long-term goals in mind when it comes to political stuff? Like knowing that like if you get a seat in a very blue district, and because incumbents can be hard to like oust, that you have like a longer presence in the House or whatever for stuff like that. Is that stuff that you consider? Or
Yes, I do. I do consider this to be a leadership district. That's what I call it, because you're right. Once we have this seat, the chances of us losing this seat is going to be very, very difficult. So what are the long-term visions? Well, for me, I am a person who likes to persuade and talk to colleagues and push really bold policy agendas. So I want to basically go into the halls of Congress and start whipping congressional members, my colleagues, to actually start falling in line of where the country is. And I think that I have a very unique ability to do that. So I guess if you want to say long term, and I don't think I've really expressed this too much in public, but in long term, I actually want to be a whip, right? I want to be like the majority whip of the party. I want to be the person that is kind of leading the charge of where we need to be voting as a group. So that's kind of the long term goals. But obviously, I want to see the Heroes Promise passed. I think that's going to be something that's going to be done fairly quickly. I also want to be able to make sure that we always have strong votes in the progressive direction that will be solid votes. So in the end, I want to be able to lead because I can be as bold as possible and not worry about losing this seat.
Do you have any like political experience so far aside from your company? Like, have you ran for any smaller offices or done like school board stuff or anything like that? Or is this gonna be your first?
So I've ran for office before. I ran for District 7 City Council, which is about 50% inside of District 53. We ran a very grassroots campaign. We were only able to raise like $30,000. We outspent 18-1. And because I was very openly supporting Bernie Sanders, the establishment turned their back on me pretty quickly here. And I didn't get the Democratic Party endorsement yet. We still knocked on doors. We were still rallying with Bernie. We were still doing all of those things, and we were able to squeak out 17% of the vote compared to the 22% of the Democrat, because we were running against an incumbent Republican, and it was a nonpartisan race. So people didn't know he was a Republican. They just said, "Oh, city council member," and they voted for him. Sure. So he ended up winning. However, the Democrat, I like to say it was a Spartan victory, because this guy was a real estate developer and he wasn't really great on a lot of the issues, and we pretty much ended his political career. He's no longer even running anymore, so for me, I feel like that was an advantage for the city to get him out of the way. And I've stayed around. In fact, it's funny because a lot of the Democratic Party membership inside of the county actually think they endorsed me that year, because that guy is so disappeared from the community.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. How if any of these are hard or you don't want to like go into any of these, you don't have
no,
to
that's fine.
Okay. I'm super curious because I haven't thought about like I over the past like 6 months I've finally taken like a more of an interest in like electoral politics. Before then I was like all like national polling and everything. So so I'm kind of curious, when you decide to run for like a congressional district in San Diego, you said you lived in Texas for a while. How long have you lived in California for?
I've lived in California in this particular
Hmm.
county, San Diego, and district for since I was 20. So I've been here for about 13 years. So this is my home. It's my family, my business. Everything is here now.
Do you ever worry, or does it ever come up where people will attack you over something like that? Like you didn't grow up here. How common is that a congressional candidate
Um,
is like there for their whole life or something?
Well, it's funny because it's not very common.
Hmm.
There is one candidate that actually does try to say to people, "Oh, he's the only one that's lived in the district pretty much his entire life."
Hmm.
But he also went to DC for like 7 years, right? So
Sure.
and then he came back and he's like, "I'm from this district." I'm like, "No, you're now out of touch. I've been here for the most recent amount of time." Both Sarah Jacobs and the council president have both don't live in the district. Sarah Jacobs just bought a house because she has so much money. She can do whatever the hell she wants in the district, but the council president doesn't live in the district either. So it doesn't really come up as often as you would think. And really, what's unique about it is I'm a veteran. And this is one of the biggest veteran districts one of the most veteran rich districts in the entire country, actually.
Hmm.
So for me, so if anyone says, "Oh, you're not from here," it's like, yeah, tell every veteran that's still here in San Diego where they're from. It's a very common story for a veteran to like fall in love with San Diego and then make it their home.
Hmm. One thing that I really like, this is just tangentially related.
Yeah, for sure.
Before like the last like 5 or 10 years, maybe even just over the last 5 years, it kind of seemed like Republicans had a monopoly on like veterans. Like
Yes, they
anytime you
have.
bring up the military, like that's a Republican. But like even today, whether you agree or disagree, and there's plenty to disagree with both these candidates, but seeing people like Tulsi or Pete like on stage on the Democratic debates, like, oh cool, like we have veterans now. I think it's a really cool move for the Democratic Party that they don't cede that territory, especially with issues related to the VA and everything. Just ceding that to the Republicans is like really bad. So that's really cool that you're a
Yeah,
veteran
and
running
and
here.
what's interesting, is that I'm a progressive veteran, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm a veteran that is to the left, that wants to fight for the values of all of us. And that's why the Hero's Promise is so critical in my race, is because I'm actually pushing real policy that actually helps veterans at a deep level. Because a lot of the Republican veterans, they kind of like want to keep status quo. They want to keep blowing stuff up. They want to keep the military industrial complex going. Now, a progressive veteran is someone who fights for peace, right? I'm a progressive veteran for peace. I want to make sure that we bring our troops home. I want to make sure that the troops that are in there aren't getting abused, and that when they get out, they have a safe journey home, because the economy isn't built for people who are just coming back for the first time after years in a completely different community.
Yeah, so I guess getting into policies, then let's look at this as like the first thing. This is like
Yeah,
a
for
kind of
sure.
like a unique thing that you've proposed. The
Yes.
Veteran Bill of Rights. Yeah, why don't you talk about it? What's like your overarching goal, and then we can kind of run through it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the overarching goal, so it's a very personal issue to me, because dealing with the abuse of the military, because the military, it's baked in. Abuse is baked in, right? Like you've seen, Full Metal Jacket, I'm sure, right? Where, boot camp is supposed to be this place where they break you down and build you up into the military's best image, right?
Hmm.
So when you are 18-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid coming into the military, and you have some man or woman yelling at you in the face inches away, calling you a piece of garbage, that may be the first experience for a lot of these young people that is traumatic, right? And that is that the next morning they wake up, it's a post-traumatic experience. So the idea of the military is trauma, right? To make it happen the way that it is, you're ordered around, you're bullied, you have to do what they say, or they'll punish you for basically anything that they want. So that control is very oppressive. So what does that lead to? That leads to 20 veterans a day killing themselves. That leads to 40% of all veterans being having issues with alcoholism. That leads to opioid abuse. That leads to all of these issues that people start using to cope with the feelings of the PTSD that they don't even understand exist themselves, because the military trains you to be strong and you're rewarded. If you're weak, you're punished. So that's why a lot of people, a lot of veterans don't talk about their mental health issues, because it seems like a form of weakness. It seems like a form of that they're not strong enough to live in the world that they live in, and then it's too late when the darkest moments come into their lives. And that's why we've lost 139,000 veterans to suicide since 9/11, and most of those people are young. So it's a really, really horrible tragedy. So getting into the nuts and bolts, we're talking about there's two sides to this policy. There's the active duty side, and then there's the veteran side. So on the active duty side, we're talking about basic meal and sleep protections, right? They punish you by waking you up, and they also punish you by putting you in a watch rotation that doesn't have dinner available afterward, right? These are the type of things that happen when you're in the military. That is abusive, and it's also bad for your mental health. We need to be able to file a grievance outside of your chain of command. Because if you're being abused by your boss, then you should be able to report that boss and not have that boss retaliate against you for reporting them. We also need to make sure that we have right to mental health protection. And what I mean by that is, I was a reactor operator, so I actually had a secret clearance. Some submariners actually have top secret clearance, depending on where they are. So if you were to go to a therapist and say, hey, I'm sad, and that therapist says, here's some prescriptions for you, you lose your job. You're no longer a nuke. All that training, all that work is now in the garbage can, and the Navy can just reassign you to anywhere that you want to go. That isn't cool. We need to be able to make sure that if people are feeling mentally ill or depressed, they should be able to go to a therapist and not be reprimanded or change their entire life trajectory. We need to give us.
I'm
go ahead.
Super curious on that. I'm gonna devil's advocate that position a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't you think it would be kind of worrisome so I imagine that if not your job alone, at least like your job in combination with a few others was probably integral to the operation or function of that carrier, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. There's only like on a given carrier, there's only about 24 watchstanders that actually stand watch on the two reactors, right? That are actually standing watch continuously.
So like I know that like in the military, trust is like essential. Like you have to be able to trust the people next to you. Do you think that it would be worrisome if some of the people like that you were relying on, who were like integral to the functioning of your ship, maybe had mental health issues? Do you think that would leave people feeling like my fellow soldier might be compromised in a way that makes me nervous to be here or makes me feel insecure to be here?
Sure, there is an argument to be made there. However, I think it's worse if you hide those issues and don't get seen for them, right? So you, like, for example, if I'm sitting next to a shipmate, right, that is dealing with deep depression, and he or she are not talking about that, then I'm not going to know when they snap, right? Like, you know, and so for me, I think it's more important to at least start talking to people, because just because somebody's going to a therapist and talking to somebody, or, you know, are on an antidepressant, that is supposed to uplift them. That is supposed to bring them back up into like normal society so they can be mental, fit for the military. But if we are creating an environment where you're supposed to hide those things and keep those things to yourself, then we are creating a deeper problem, because we don't know how many people are sick, how many people are hurting deep down, and that's, you know, and I think that is more dangerous, because all of a sudden it's like, whoa, like, you know, Petty Officer Caballero just freaking snapped and is now trying to break the reactor. How did we know? Sure. Right. And that is very scary. And so for me, the way I look at it is, let's say somebody's really clinically depressed. I'm like super depressed, like they're ready to kill themselves or whatever. That is something that we can say, okay, we're going to give you help, but we're not going to remove you from the ability to do the job. We're just going to set you aside for a little bit until you are sane enough to come back to the job. Right. But to completely say, nope, you're done forever, and that will follow you for the rest of your life, it will add on to the depression of, oh my gosh, I just wasted my life. My, 3.5 years of training on a reactor to operate a reactor is now in the garbage can. And now if I go to a civilian world after that, those people are like, oh, why aren't you a nuke anymore? Why didn't you finish your entire tour of duty as a reactor operator? right? And that will follow you and haunt you for the rest of your life, and would completely change your career set, which a lot of people don't want to do. Because I know a lot of people who were great reactor operators and they were fantastic, on the job. But the second, they got off of job, they were bullied and abused to the point where they're just like, it was the environment that made those people sad. It wasn't the actual job itself of operating. That, in fact, I would say that my happiest times were probably operating the reactor in the Navy, right? And so I think we have to make sure that we parcel, what is the actual problem, and the problem is the environment. That's why the hero's promise is the way that it is, because it's supposed to protect those people from the harmful environments that will lead people to, the rope or a gun or a razor, right? Like we got to make sure that we provide those protections.
For
Does
sure.
that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely understand. It seems like a really hairy issue. My
It is
biggest
a very-
fear would be like, I agree that like it sucks because there's something, I'm sure you've heard the expression a chilling effect, where like if you feel like if you report something like a mental health issue, then you're going to get in trouble for it, then you're dissuading everybody from reporting it, which means it's going to exist whether you want it to or not, and it could have impacts. It would suck though if somebody was on like SSRIs and had like depression or something, and then was involved in like a major military accident. I feel like there would be like a lot of blowback against that. Kind of like any time like an illegal immigrant might kill somebody or steal something, like everybody. Yeah.
And one thing as well is like there are training modules that you can do. So I've operated reactors on live carriers, and I've also operated reactors on displays, right? Like they're digital displays that you go in and you operate. So there isn't, you can keep somebody proficient on reactor operations until like once a therapist says, no, this person's good, they can go and operate, the live reactor now. But to completely just remove them 100% is dangerous. So as long as we can keep reactor operators proficient in the job and not have to like actually operate that reactor, I think that would also be a way to not have to just dissuade. Because like obviously if somebody's like, I'm going to blow up the ship, like, if somebody says that in a therapy session, of course we're not going to put them on a reactor, right? Sure. Like we want to make sure that we want to keep them out of it. But if somebody's like, man, my wife left me and I'm just having a bad time coping with that, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to operate a reactor, right? And that's why we need right to mental health services, so professionals can actually evaluate the danger or where the actual sailor is when operating these type of equipment. Right. So that I think that's what we need. And yeah, there's different flavors of mental illness, right? And we need to make sure we parse out which ones are dangerous for the equipment and the personnel on board, and which ones are just like, oh, he's a little sad that his wife left him. You know what I mean? And so there so that's kind of the way that I look at it, is that we can destigmatize it. That's what I want. I want to destigmatize it, because right now it's stigmatized in the military. 100%.
On a couple of these points, and this is actually my own ignorance, I'm just curious, for citizenship for all veterans, is it really possible to serve in the U.S. military and not be a citizen?
That's true. Yes. So there are deported veterans right now that actually exist. And usually what happens is somebody signs up, goes into the military. They're not a citizen, but they sign like a contract that says, when you're in, you do the citizenship paperwork, and then after you serve for a certain amount of time, they grant you with that, right? That's kind of the way they do it. But let's say you go out and let's say you get out of the military and you're still waiting for that timeline to become a citizen. And let's say, you're dealing with your PTSD, you're an alcoholic, and you go and jump behind the wheel of a car and you get a DUI. They will deport you for that. They will say, nope, your contract is done. We're going to void your citizenship, and they will deport you, even though you may have served honorably for 4 years, right, or 2 years, or depending on how many years that they served. I think that's wrong. And the way that I look at it is, let's say the worst happens. Let's say, somebody has a homicidal episode, right, and they go and they kill somebody, right, and they're not a citizen yet, but they served in the military. I think that person still deserves the right to due process in America. If they're going to go to prison, they should go to an American prison. There's no need to just ship that person overseas or over, wherever they come from, right, over the border. to then serve their time in another country when they at least fought in this country. The least we can do is give them prison time in this country. I know it's a kind of a weird thing to say, but I think, you know, if you serve in the military, like you signed up to pay the ultimate sacrifice if you had to for this country, the least we can do is say you can be a citizen.
For sure. And then for the education for all veterans, are you talking about like expanding like GI Bill benefits or?
Yes. Yes, because right now I have student loan debt, right? And I took the GI Bill. The reason I still have student loan debt is because I decided to get some higher education after the 36 month time period. So the GI Bill only works for 36 months. Once you're educated for longer than 36 months, the GI Bill is no longer available to you. I think that we should just allow veterans to just go to as much education as they want. It only betters the country. If a veteran wants to become a doctor, a lawyer, a professor, they should have that right to do so because they're going to be producing and providing for this country in a very specific way. Not every veteran, and I can tell you, in fact, most veterans don't actually take advantage of their education benefit. So it's not like it's a huge cost burden on the country to expand that benefit to all education tuition free. So that's what I think we should be able to afford veterans, because we have intelligent veterans coming out, you know, that want higher education. Yeah, so we should offer that to them.
Okay, so you said that San Diego, or the district that you're in, had a pretty high density of veterans, right?
Yes, very high.
What other like big policy positions are the most relevant to talk about in your district that either pull the best or what? Yeah.
Yeah, so immigration's another one because we're not on the border, but we're right next door to the border district.
San Diego,
And so yeah, exactly. 1/3 of the district is actually fairly south. So that is a big issue because people don't want their families to be removed, you know, a lot of times. So they think that it's inhumane practices that are happening. Obviously, the camps and the child separation, the ICE roving around our streets, taking people from, you know, just kidnapping people in broad daylight. Like these things are happening, and that's become a very big issue. So, you know, eliminating the refugee cap, making sure that we have a one-page intake that allows people to come in. Allows people to come into this country with they fill out the paperwork, they fill out where they are, their basic demographic information. We put them through a criminal background check internationally, and if they come back clear, give them an ankle bracelet, let them go back and go into the country where their family is, and then allow them to set up a court date where they want to be regionally. So that way we can take off pressure off of the court border system. So like all of these courts are all being inundated with people at the border. Why don't we have some immigration courts happening in Wyoming, in Nebraska, and Wisconsin, right? Like there are people that want to move to those areas that have family there. So we could actually alleviate a lot of the court system problems and chop down the waiting line by doing that. We need to remove the hold period, right? Where we're just holding people just for the hell of it. We need to shut down all the private prison facilities that are holding people as well. You know, I cannot stress how angry I get when I see an establishment Democrat going and using the argument like we need to give more money to the facilities so it could be more comfortable. It's like, no, we need to shut down the facilities. I don't want to make a prison more comfortable and allow more people to go into it. You're buying into the Republican argument of they need more money so they can detain more people. And you know, and I get what people like, oh, it's a human rights thing. It's like, no, the human rights thing is that they're there in the first place. Stop pretending like if we give them a Hilton hotel situation that it's going to be better for them. They want to be with their families. They don't want to be in a cushy prison cell. Like that's not what we want to give our people. So I want to do that as well and shut down those facilities. And I want to also abolish ICE. So those are a few of the policy points that I have at the border, and also sending more administrators to make sure that we can take in the crisis.
I'm kind of curious, how does refugee allocation work? That's got to be like a federal thing, right? When you talk about like shipping off like refugees to other districts for their courts to process them or whatever, is there a chance that like Nebraska, for instance, might not have like a court system that's capable of dealing with those types of cases? Or
Possibly, right? And but one of the things are like it just like any other like court system. Like when you file a case, when you file, whatever, the court then takes in that file, and then the appropriate judge and appropriate clerks will put in the right information and make you see those things. Now,
Mhm.
if all of a sudden, let's say Nebraska has 20 immigration cases that they have to see, then they probably need to bring in another judge, right? They probably need to expand their court bench to make sure that they take in that type of work. So we can start bolstering those processes in those areas that are weaker.
Mhm.
So I think that it could, we can benefit in two ways there. Not only are we going to be able to de-stress the court systems on the border, but we can also increase the effectiveness of the court systems in places that don't normally get a lot of cases.
Don't you think there'd be a lot of pushback from those states who wouldn't want to have to fight with the increase in funding, like the budget struggles and everything, to hire more lawyers to deal with what they would? I mean, it's a country's problem, but they would say like, well, we don't want California's problems, in our state now.
It's going to have to be a reframing,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're going to have to reframe the argument because, like, the border crisis is not just a border state problem, right? The border crisis, or whatever you want to call it, it's not really a crisis. It's manufactured to be a crisis, but the border situation is a national situation,
Mm-hmm.
and we have mountains of evidence to show that when refugees come into communities, that those communities actually start to prosper. They start producing more. They actually start having more tax revenue. They actually really start benefiting a lot of those community areas that didn't have a lot of support. So there is an argument to be made. It's like, well, your labor pools need more help too.
Mm-hmm.
You need more production, right? There's just nobody out there, so we can actually help bring more resources to their state. So there's an argument to be made that if they do accept these people, that they're going to receive more money for their own infrastructures, their own necessary needs that they need in these states. Because you can look at states like Kansas and you could say, wow, they need a lot of help. They need a lot of support. So if we were to, let's say, do a block grant, for example, which is like, if you accept this number of people, you will receive this many X dollars of federal funding for your schools or for your roads or for, affordable housing, whatever the representatives in those areas want their people to have, we need to be able to provide those resources to them. So it's kind of like a carrot and a stick situation.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the state has the right to say whatever they want because, we have states' rights in this country. If they say no, well, they're also saying no to the money and the resources that could effectively help their community members as well. So that's the way we have to play the game. It's a carrot and a stick, right? And we want to be able to entice states to be able to make these decisions on their own so they can receive the benefits that we could provide in Congress, because Congress has the purse strings. So we have the ability to actually allocate resources to states that comply, just like the federal freeway system, right? Not all states have to have 65-mile-an-hour speed limit signs, but they do, because if they don't, they
don't get
lose federal
funding.
highway.
Yeah.
So it's the same type of situation.
Okay, makes sense. Is San Diego County or the county or the part of the county, I guess, that your district is representing, pretty like unified on these types of immigration issues, like things like abolish ICE and being like relatively pro-immigration and everything?
Yeah, most of it is. I would say that 2/3 of it is pretty strong on that issue. You have the southern portion, and then you have the central portion. So the central portion of San Diego, which is like the most dense neighborhoods, those areas are very, very liberal. You're talking about the highest level of Bernie supporters, the youngest amount of people, or the most amount of young people. These are the people that are going to the women's marches, the immigration rallies. Like, that's where a lot of that base is actually happening. So a lot of that is going to be very, very strong. Now, as far as the northeastern portion of the district, it might be a little bit more shaky, but at the end of the day, they also feel like we are taking in a lot of the brunt of the issue, and they want to see that spread around too.
For sure.
Yeah.
What do you think what is the most divisive issue between you and the establishment Dems running? Like, what's like the one issue that you set yourself apart on, or what are a couple of issues that you think you really set yourself apart on from establishment Dems?
Yeah, for sure. One is that I'm fighting for Medicare for all with the elimination of private health insurance.
Hmm.
None of the other candidates are fighting for that issue. Well, they say Medicare for all, but they say it in that establishment way where it's like Medicare for all, but they kind of don't elaborate what that means.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like that Medicare for all for everybody who wants it, right? It's kind of that type of rhetoric. Another one is that I am very, very pro-veteran and trying to actually give real veteran rights. A lot of the establishment people, they're not really touching that because they don't really know how to.
Hmm.
That's a big issue. I'm also fighting for the elimination of student loan debt. And no other candidate has actually said that publicly, because we have major universities in this district, like San Diego State University, my alum, right? There's a lot of students that live in the area, and there's a lot of parents that live in the area that want to see that removed as well. And that's pretty much, I think, the big ones. I also want to allocate. I'm also standing for housing for all. I'm actually going to be adding this to the website, but I want to allocate 1.48 trillion dollars to over 10 years to basically address affordable housing crises across this country. So that means LA, San Diego, New York, Philadelphia, all of the San Francisco, all the major cities that have housing crises. We need to be able to allocate specific resources to those areas to build more places. So I'm very aggressive on that as well. And obviously Green New Deal candidate, but I think some of the candidates are actually trying to say that as well. So but though I think those are the biggest things, and I'm just an unapologetic progressive. So that's my biggest issues. Yeah.
Okay. I can poke you on a couple of these just because I'm curious. I
Yeah,
probably
go for
fall
it.
more in line economically as definitely like an establishment dem more than like a progressive one. So I'll
Hmm.
give you a couple of our standard questions for some of these.
Sure.
So for the Medicare for all thing, on the private option and the or not private option on the single payer with the elimination of private health insurance,
Yes.
how do you respond to people that would say it would be easier? So I think like people like Pete have made this argument. It would be easier to have a very strong public option, and then maybe in the future that becomes so amazing that it essentially becomes single payer, or we can transition into eliminating private healthcare after a public option has been offered for a long while. That would be more politically feasible and more financially feasible as well. It'd be easier for a budget and everything as well.
Yeah. So one thing we can't ignore
Hmm.
that the pharmaceutical companies and the medical industry are not going to allow a robust single payer system. If we start at the level of a compromise of like, we're going to let you exist, they are going to start creating packages that are going to undercut our government system. They're going to have lobbyists that are going to make our Medicare for all system weaker and more expensive, and so that's going to make more problems than they're worth. So let's look at it this way: if we actually eliminated the private health insurance industry, we would no longer have to compete with their cutthroat, policies that hurt American people. So if we were to say, well, you're on Medicare for all, the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies only have to negotiate with the country. That's it. You have one option. That's the way it's going to be. And that is going to make it much easier for citizens to understand it and utilize it. Another thing is why, like private businesses, companies, they are tired. And I know this because when I hire a full-time employee, and once I have a certain number of them, because my labor pool fluctuates, because during campaign season there's more people,
Hmm.
during non-campaign season there's less people. But once I hit a threshold, I have to start providing healthcare for
Hmm.
my employees, which I provide because it's the right thing to do, because I have to in this country. But I'd prefer not to. I'd prefer that the government take care of that take care of my worker, and make sure that they get the best quality healthcare available, rather than having to rely on me to actually push my values onto the consumer so I can pay my workers a medical cost. So if you look at it this way, when we have private health insurance, especially at the employer level, Americans are paying twice for their health care. Not only are they paying for their own health care, they're also paying for the employer that they're buying products from healthcare, because the products become more expensive because labor costs more, because healthcare costs more. And if we were to remove that from the equation, businesses could actually pay people what they feel is required, rather than saying, oh, I can't pay you $17 or $18 an hour because I have to pay 3 or 4 of those dollars into your healthcare. So Americans are paying hand over fist in cost just in that alone. Right? Because if we were to actually give that cost of what the employers are paying the healthcare to the actual employees, and then they would just pay taxes and things like that, then they would actually be saving tons of money. Their incomes would go up. So I think that that is the best situation that we can have in this country, because private health insurance only objective is to make money on the cost of people's accidents and health. And I think that healthcare is a right, and we shouldn't commodify the need for you breaking your leg. When you break your leg, do you shop around for the best hospital? No, you just go to the hospital. You go to the doctor, right? They basically are pulling you over a barrel and making you pay for these costs that the health insurance industry is telling you have to pay. So we need to be able to open up that process to a public option, so people can actually see what their costs are going to, rather than this closed box operation that the private health insurance has created. So I know that's a long answer, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
Sure. How do you respond to people that that would say, like, in terms of like raising taxes on groups of people? A really common charge that we've seen thrown at Warren and Bernie Sanders is like, are you going to raise taxes on the middle class? What kind of an answer do you give in response to those kinds of questions?
Well, the question is, factually, yeah, your taxes are going to go up just a tiny bit. But not a lot for like middle class people, but just a tiny bit. But you're going to be saving so much money on the back end of having not to pay for your own healthcare, right? If you don't have to pay for your own healthcare, some people in America, families are paying like over, several $1,000s a month. Like, even if it's a good plan, like they're paying like $800, $700,000 a month to make sure that their families are.
Wait, hello? Oh.
Right? Like if we raise taxes $2,000 on people, but they're saving 10, then yes, we're going to go that route, right? That makes a lot of sense. And we're not even talking about if somebody gets hurt, like these premiums, these copays. An average family has a premium of $5,000, right? Or not premium, but yeah, that's right. That when they get hurt, they have to pay up to $5,000 before they actually get paid out. Copay, thank you. Well, the copay is when you go and see the doctor, but yeah, you have to pay the copay or the deductible. That's what it is. Sorry, the deductible.
Oh, the deductible. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So like the average American is about $5,000 on their deductible. So you have to get $5,000 worth of damage plus before you even get any money back from your healthcare insurance at all. So when you're a family, and I'm a young family, I have my fiance and my 5-year-old son. Like if my son gets hurt, I'm going to do everything in the world to make sure he's safe. But I don't want to go bankrupt for it. You know what I mean? Just because, I don't have $5,000 just chilling in my bank account ready for the next emergency. Right. So that's where we got to look at, is the fact that you're going to save so much more money in the back end, not paying and also not having the headache of dealing with an insurance company is also really great, because you don't have to go and call your insurance company. It's like, is this going to be covered? Am I going to qualify? Like, screw that. We don't need that anymore. Right. We just go to the doctor, we get served, and then we're done. Right. And we leave. So yeah.
When it comes to, so this is something that we've taken some hardline stance on before in my community. When it comes to like pragmatic politics, like what can get passed versus kind of the more ethical or moral guidance of like what should we pass. If somebody were to demonstrate to you that getting like single payer, well, I think we can say pretty safely, getting single payer is going to be a lot harder than getting like a public option. Does that factor into your decision at all for what to push for, or do you only push for what you think would be like the optimal solution, and you don't care like what the probability of it succeeding or failing is? Like, how do you weigh that? I know it's a really tough one.
So it is really tough, and you got to look at it from the district level, right? Yeah. So I am going to be one voice, out of 435, and one thing that I do know by canvassing the doors out in my community is that people are dying, like, well, almost quite literally dying for single payer Medicare for all system, right? Like, so my district, and they've done polling on this, 70% of the country agrees that a Medicare for all program would actually be very effective, right? So if we kind of live in a progressive bubble here, so that number actually is way higher, right, than 70%, the national average. So when it comes down to it, the argument that we need to have Medicare for all with the elimination of private health insurance is an argument that needs to be on the floor of Congress. Now, when it comes to pragmatism of like, is this going to pass? We don't know yet, right? All we know is that when we get these people elected into office, and hopefully I'm going to be among them, that we're going to be able to make real solid arguments on the floor that the American people are going to be able to hear. We're going to be on mainstream media. We're going to be making these arguments and start the persuasion campaign to bring up the level of knowledge of the American people to make it not as scary. Because right now there's a monopoly in the media saying what you just said. It's like, this isn't pragmatic. We're not going to be able to pass it. It's going to be, this isn't going to work. Well, our job as politicians and community members is to challenge that status quo and bring that argument to the stage so we can actually have a real civilized discussion about what is actually practical and what actually can be done in this country. But we can't have that argument until people like myself are in office. So yes, there's an argument to be made, but I think that can always be made for every single argument out there. Right? Like, how are you going to pass this thing in this country? People were telling that to FDR when he was trying to pass Social Security, right? People were telling that to people who were trying to remove child labor. Like, all of these things, there's always an oppositional force that is going to try to assume that it's unbreakable. So what we got to do is we got to prove it. We got to prove it. And the only way we're going to be able to prove it is by bringing these arguments to the floor. So the answer is maybe, but we got to try.
Sure.
Right.
When it comes to things like eliminating student loan debt, this is like another like where does the money come from question. How do you approach it when people talk about getting a college degree? We can see that there's like a pretty big premium paid to degree holders.
Yes.
I don't know the numbers offhand, but it's like I think it's about $25,000 a year in average earnings in median earnings from like a degree holder versus like somebody with just a high school education. Yeah. When you talk about taxing people, or when you talk about raising taxes on any part of, say, the middle class to pay back like the government to forgive the loans of all these degree holders, how do you navigate those types of questions? So I think this is another Pete saying where he'll say like, I don't know why a middle class person should have to pay off, the education of somebody that's now earning a lot of money because they have a degree. How do you deal with those types of issues?
Well, first off, we can say to the argument is to eliminate student loan debt, we don't need to raise taxes on anybody when it comes to like the middle class. We can make that money up because you're only talking about $1.6 trillion. And I know it's only that much, but if we were to break that up into 10 years, right, that isn't that much. That's reversing the Trump tax cuts, actually taxing the wealthy their fair share, doing the stock market transitional trades, the micro transactions, carbon tax. There is so many innovative ways that we can actually pay for the elimination of student loan debt, because it's very simple. Think about it this way. Like, if we were to say, okay, to all the loan companies across the country, right, like Navient and wherever they're coming from, right, like we go, okay, the government is going to pay off all of your loans, but it's going to take 10 years. You're going to be receiving this lump sum payment over the next 10 years until all the loan is paid off. That allows those companies to continue their operations, right? To continue to get their money back on all the loans that they pay back their investors. They will be getting an interest rate. So they would be very happy to allow that rather than chasing down a bunch of broke students every day, trying to get those payments through. So I think that there's so many innovative ways to pay down our student loan debt, and that would get the noose off of the neck of these students, because without a student loan debt, you can start a business, you can put a down payment on a house, you can go and do things that money can get into the economy. So we need to put those dollars into the economy because people need to live, because it's too expensive. So that would go into the communities rather than some rich loan investor. right? And so that's kind of the way that I see it. It's really not that big of a cost. So I don't think that we're going to need to raise one penny on any middle class.
You don't
for
think
that.
so? I know that you say that like it's only like $1.5 or so trillion spread over 10 years. Maybe we fight for the funding by reversing some tax cuts or something to get it out of the budget. But I imagine you'd also probably want to couple this with ongoing payment of education as well, right? Like you've also stated
Yes.
that you want to make education for free. So
Yes.
we would have to continue to fund it as well on top of that. Do you think all of
Right.
this can be funded out of like the financial transaction taxes, the FTTs, or stuff like that? You think you can find the funding?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to look at like how much money is in the stock market and speculative markets, right? Like we don't even know how much money billionaires have, or the trillionaires. They may be even trillionaires. We don't even know, right? Because they have so much money offshore. Like like we probably only know about 50% of the actual market of money that exists, because we only see public dollars. So that's stock market, that's real estate, that's all of that. But when it comes to like the closed bank accounts of these people that are overseas, we don't even know how much money is there. So I think that there is plenty of money with financial stock trading and financial markets to be able to pay for education, because it's such a drop in the bucket. And it says for every dollar that we spend on education, we get 10 back. Right. So we need to make sure that we use that model rather than saying, oh, let's just keep the billionaires richer and then they can trickle some of that money down into our hands by their charity. We could actually say, no, we're going to invest in people, and those people are going to increase the value of our society and productivity.
Mm-hmm. Are you so I'm trying not to get like too in the weeds on any of these.
No, yeah, it's fine.
In terms of like funding things via like the financial transaction taxes. So like one common response that I've heard for this is like when you're talking about especially things like high frequency trades or like derivative markets, sometimes the margins on these trades are quite close. These aren't like you're like massively profitable in every trade. So some people have said, I've seen this a lot in Bernie's in response to like Bernie's FTT proposals, that like if you start to put any type of tax, like a per trade tax on these markets, that these markets would essentially dry up and you wouldn't find the revenue there. Have you, and I'm not asking you to like grow your own figures order, but have you looked into any of these responses to see like would it actually be economically viable to fund like our entire education system out of like a per transaction tax on our derivative markets? Or do you think that's like a little bit too hopeful that maybe those markets will shift pretty significantly in response to that type of like closing of profit margin or elimination of it?
Yeah, sure. So we have to look at this as a temporal argument, like time, right? We got to look like if we were to put this transactional tax in, a lot of these billionaire companies, these billion-dollar Fortune 500 companies that are doing a lot of these things, their models are already built around that. So they already have a financial stake in how this money is shifting around. It's not going to be overnight that they're just going to figure out a new financial system that is going to be able to provide the same type of value that is already being provided by these transactions in the first place. Now, you got to remember, the reason they do these transactions in the first place is to get a leg up on the little guy, right? The day trader, the person like you and I, if we wanted to get involved in stocks, right? That's why they're doing this stuff. So they may say we're going to try to change our system, but that's our job as legislators to catch them. So if they start shifting the way they're doing business, we're going to shift the way we make sure they're not skating the taxes, because anything that they shift away from that, that's them evading the taxes. So we need to be able to be nimble, just like they're nimble. And we got to make sure, okay, so you're not doing that anymore, but you're doing this criminal activity. Well, we're going to go in and tax that one too. Right. So it's about not setting it and forgetting it. It's about being proactive and making sure where that line is sliding on where the money is going, because that's what it is. It's like they're just evading taxes. So we just need to make sure we shift that with them.
Sure. I would be really clear here, just to say, like, there is a difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance, right?
Yes.
So, like,
well, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for that.
Tax avoidance is totally legitimate to shift up your business strategy if there's like taxation that's like causing like a decrease in profit somewhere. That tax avoidance is okay. Tax evasion is like the illegal, like I'm actually like, yeah, okay.
Thank you for that correction. And you're right. It is definitely tax avoidance. But no, thank you for that. I agree.
For sure. When it comes to things like housing, so especially now, I actually come from Nebraska. I lived in Nebraska for 30 years, and now I've been in California for almost a year now, and it's caused me to look at housing stuff a lot more. What do you think about, and this might be the area that I'll fight with you the most on. We could fight over any other issue, but I'm curious on housing.
Yeah.
What do we do? Oh my goodness.
I know, right?
Uh-huh.
So right now, California, it's a housing crisis. It's an
Not
emergency.
just
It's
California, but
yeah.
Washington, New
Oh
York,
yeah,
cities over the world.
absolutely.
Yep, yeah.
So we have 7.8 million homes deficit right now in this country. So we need to build a lot of stock, but we also need to unlock a lot of stock. So they're a housing stock. What I mean. So for example, let's go with the easy ones first. Like right now, like in the states, I use San Diego as an example here because it's happening all over. I'm sure you know Airbnb, right?
Hmm.
The way they do their practices. Airbnb model is that they allow people to rent out their homes and their in the rooms or whatever.
It's like
But
subleasing kind of on a smaller
subleasing,
scale.
right?
Hmm.
However, what people don't realize is only about 50 to 25% of the market that Airbnb has to offer is those one bedrooms in somebody's home or that granny flat above somebody's home, personal home. This is actually investors from Dubai, China,
Can,
Europe that
can
are
I real
going in
quick?
and buying those houses and using them for Airbnb.
Yeah, this is actually something that I noticed. Man, I want to say Airbnb started. Was it like 8 or 9 years ago? Maybe has it been that
Mhm.
long? When I heard, or this is like around when I heard about it. It was like almost a decade ago, and it used to be that when you would Airbnb, there's like some family that has like a spare room like in the basement or whatever, and you'd rent it
Mhm.
out. Nowadays when you Airbnb, you get like a chain email that you know that like wasn't written by an actual person, and they
Right.
tell you like when you show up you've got to like crawl down the sewer, and there's like a secret lockbox inside a room you got to
Yeah.
go to. And if the guy, I remember when I rented one out, I got a text right before I got in, and the guy was like, oh, by the way, like if the guy at the desk asks who you are, tell him you're my brother, like Joaquin or whatever. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck? Like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I've noticed that shit where it's like major companies that are like buying up like properties just to like Airbnb, and people actually
Right.
complain about this happening in. Oh man, in another country actually, and I saw this video like 5 or 6 years ago, and it looked so silly. But now it's like common practice where when I
Yeah.
Airbnb, I'm pretty much assuming it's a major company that's bought a whole bunch of units. It's just renting them out to people on this app.
Absolutely. They're actually Airbnb vacation rental management companies.
Mm-hmm.
It is so, like if you were a $1 million investor, you could come to San Diego, buy up a couple homes, right? Go hire a vacation rental company to go and manage those homes so people can move into them. So you got to realize, what does that do? Well, that eliminates our housing stock, because rather than having an actual family in the community live in that home, you're going to have some random person come in and out over and over and over. What does that do? It kills communities, it kills schools, because school attendance starts to drop, and therefore sometimes it drops so low that the public school doesn't even have the need to be there anymore, which is tragic, right? So you're increasing commutes for children in neighborhoods because that school doesn't have enough attendance and funding to be able to stay in operation. Like, these are the things that are happening. So we need to make sure we go in and do a ban that doesn't allow companies or people, private investors, to go and usurp zoning laws. For example, we have hotels, right? We have motels, we
Mm-hmm.
have places in the country that are zoned for tourism and people who are guests into the cities and communities that they live. But what's happening is we're creating de facto hotels and motels out of community homes. And what that's doing is it's removing the housing stock for people like you and I to go and effectively live in these homes. So that's one thing that we need to do. We need to eliminate that, because it's making private investors that are not even living here wealthy. In fact, Dubai and San Diego is a very, very big investor of Airbnb vacation rentals here, because we live in San Diego. It's beautiful here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing we need to do is we need to form some form of national rent control. We in this country are allowing these landlords to basically rule over the people, right? Like, we're letting these landowners, basically, in a sense, basically rule over how we are supposed to be living in our society. So, for example, I've been living in San Diego now for like I said, about 13, 14 years now. And when I lived here 13 years ago, rents were not that bad. But now rents have gone up almost $700 from where they were, $800 or $1,000 more than
Mm-hmm.
they were. people's wages didn't go up $1,000 in San Diego or more, right? So what's happening is the cost of living is going up because of the fact that the rents are going up so high. We need to be able to protect renters from those predatory practices of what these landlords are doing. So we need to provide that type of system. We need to invest massive amount of money. Like I said, $1.48 trillion over 10 years to build affordable housing. So, and we need to empower communities like San Diego County or LA County or San Francisco County, New York County, right? Like these areas need to be able to build developments in their communities. And what's wrong right now is that development is completely run by the private industry. So these developers are going into these communities and they're saying, I'm going to build this place, but I'm going to build it for a profit. And if you don't let me do it, I'm just not going to build, or I'm just going to make this extremely expensive so investors can come in and purchase this. We need to be able to protect cities and counties from these predatory developers so we can actually start developing and saying, no, you will build this or you will not build at all. And we'll find somebody who will, because that's what we need is affordable housing stock, and that money will be allocated for that. And I also believe we also need to give about $500 billion to the mixed use communities, right? So where we build, places where there's like development, but underneath there is like shopping centers and things of that nature, so people don't have to go in their car and drive across the city just so they can go and get groceries, right? We need to start creating more mixed use development that actually allows people to live and survive where they live, so they don't have to jump in their car, right? So that will help transit as well. So there's a lot of things that we can do that will effectively alleviate our housing crisis, and all it takes is just a little bit of money and putting it into the proper zoning, and also making sure that we plug the holes that created the housing crisis in the first place, right? Like the vacation rentals and the rent and the predatory rent controls, right? And the predatory developers. So there's a lot of things that we have to do on both sides: resources to build, legislation and regulation to stop the predatory practices that create the problems in the first place.
Okay. All right. This is where I'm going to put my stake in the sand, all right? And we'll go back and forth this a little bit.
For sure. Absolutely.
So I take issue with calling developers predatory because they want to make a profit. I mean, that's kind of like, at least the way that we're structured, like economically now, like we would never say like that grocery store is predatory because they want to sell food for a profit, or that clothing store is predatory because they want to sell clothes for a profit. I don't know if I would say that like a developer that builds a building and wants to rent it out is a predator because they want to make a profit. That's generally like an expected behavior. If you make some capital investment, hopefully you make money off it, right?
Yeah. So I'm gonna push back a little bit. So you are right to an extent, right? I'm a business owner, so I make a profit, right?
Sure.
I have to, or I can't thrive, right? I can't do what I do. So what I'm talking about in particular, and I'm going to get a little bit into the policy weeds, not too much, but just a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm going to use San Diego as an example. So in San Diego, you have something called you have to create a certain percentage of affordable housing within a development. So let's say you're a developer, you're coming to San Diego, you have to make at least 15% of the units that you're building affordable housing. So therefore you have to make sure that you have ability for people to come in for lower income. However, in San Diego, you have something called an in lieu fee. So rather than paying the 15%, rather than getting the 15% affordable housing, they can pay a fee to the city, and then they can no longer have to build that affordable housing. So what does that mean? The developers aren't just paying this in lieu fee at the kindness of their heart. They transfer that cost of that in lieu fee onto the renter. So that increases the price of that condominium or that apartment by a lot, because they are the ones that are saying, no, this isn't affordable. This is just nice housing. So what's happening is when we are saying as a city, hey, we need affordable housing and we need market rate housing and labor force housing, these developers are like, no, we're going to build luxury housing because that's where we're going to make all of our money.
Why
right?
can't you just zone for affordable housing and get rid of like these weird kind of like this sounds like rent seeking 101. Like why not just eliminate that Luffy thing or whatever?
That's what I said. Like, I agree. That's
Hmm.
why I run a lot of city council candidates, because I'm trying to, help these city council candidates talk about, hey, we not only need to eliminate the in lieu fees, we also need to increase the percentage of how many affordable houses they have in those areas.
Hmm.
That's the regulations that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is that we need to make sure that these developers, like, again, I don't mind a developer coming in, building a bunch of affordable housing and making a good profit on doing a service for the city. That's great. You did a service. If you're producing affordable housing for young people and young families to come in and be able to work and play in San Diego, great. I am 100% for it. I want you to be able to continue to do that work. What I'm talking about is that there's these developers that are super wealthy and want to make as much money as possible at the cost of our community. That's predatory, right? And I guess I had to like decipher what I'm talking about. So thank you for the clarification on that.
Hmm. I guess like so when I look at housing, I guess, but to propose like my positive solution rather than just attacking yours, it feels to me like it's a like I see there are so many detrimental, like there's so much fallout from stuff like rent control or stuff like potentially like doing public housing is going to involve like a pretty dramatic restructuring of how we do housing. Like I live in, have you ever been to LA, up to LA?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
I live north of Hollywood in a little city called Glendale. 95% of people, yeah, sure. It's not like a big city or anything, but like I am in a 1-bedroom loft and I pay about $2,700 a month for my rent. Yeah. And then I'm also paying for a 3-bedroom house back in Nebraska for $1,300 a month. So
Jeez,
yeah,
okay.
pretty significantly different. For my apartment, so like there's things that I don't have any idea why in California. So like I don't know why there are no tall apartments in Glendale. Like this is like 5 stories. I don't know why when I walk across the street there are all these like single family homes. It feels like when it comes to a lot of these housing issues that like we can try and play games with rent control, we can try and talk about like specific laws, but like, why can't we just zone more high density like housing? Like it doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be government funded. Like either pay market value and like destroy some people. I don't know, and beat them out and like just zone out like high density housing. Why can't that just be the option? Let the market come in, let people build things like.
Yeah, that is one of the probably biggest political enigmas that we have right now, in I guess American politics. So me as a federal legislator, right, and I just want to caveat this: I cannot go into Glendale and say you need a zone for high density. Oh, right, but I can, as talk to state legislatures and talk to different local people. But this is the issue. I'm sure you've heard of the YIMBY movement, right?
Yeah, God.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, because
right?
the problem is you have to do this in a totalitarian way. You have to ignore all the homeowners in the area because everybody's going to be against it. Yeah.
Exactly, which is also detrimental too, right? And it doesn't work. So a lot of this urban sprawl, especially in a suburb like Glendale, right? You have a lot of old people that have said, I built this piece of land for myself. This is mine. I don't want to see high rises. I don't want to see the community fabric of my home be completely changed, right? And there's a lot of that set in mindset where people are like, I don't want to change that. I don't want it, right? So what we have to do is we, as young people, have to go into those city council meetings, go in and say, hey, look, I want a higher height limit, right? Because I bet you that you said 5 stories is where you're at.
Yeah, it's like 5 or 6 stories, and I wondered like maybe I don't know anything. Maybe it's because of earthquakes, but if I go downtown, there are skyscrapers there, so it can't be that, right?
So it's a height limit. So I guarantee you that the place that you live is probably as high as they allowed it to go, which is probably six stories, because the residents of Glendale aren't wanting to see a bunch of high rises. They don't want to see their communities turn into what it looks like in downtown LA. But the problem is sprawl is not good. Like you have the transit problems. You have the fact that people can't live in those regions. You have a lot of major issues with sprawl, especially environmentalism as a whole, right? Environmentally, it's bad. So we have to go in and say, look, we have an emergency. Now, this is something that I was thinking, and I'm not running for president, so I can't declare emergency, right? Because if you declared a national housing crisis emergency, then I think we'd be able to give our local governments a little bit more of a hammer, right, to be able to pass legislation that will piss off a lot of the older residents in communities, right? But we need to piss off some. We can't make everybody happy, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you were to build a large residence, let's say in Glendale. I'm going to use Glendale as an example because there's a lot of parallel examples in San Diego. So please correct me if I'm making a wild assumption about Glendale. But if you were to go in and let's say you were to take a block in a residential sprawled area of Glendale, and you say we're going to buy all the houses on this block, condemn them, flatten it out, and then all of a sudden you have, you know, a big sign and you start seeing that says we're going to be building this community blah blah blah, right?
I want a Swedish, like the 30-story communist fucking apartments.
Right,
that's what I want to say.
Right?
Yep.
You would have protests every day in the council offices of older white affluent people that are going to come in and say, if you do this, I'm going to vote you out. And they're going to protest every effing day.
People say this, but I think that it's actually an issue that people are unified on, that they want to keep housing bad, because like it wouldn't just be the white, because it would be like the affluent building owners and landlords that would be incentivized to kick that out, but it would also be the homeowners too, which I think is like the big problem. Because if I own a home that and these dilapidated I shouldn't say dilapidated, but these like very small, very bad houses are like, I'll look these up on Zillow, like sell for like $950,000, right? Well, if you live there and now all of a sudden they zone, you know, some 20-story high-rise apartment building, well, your property values are going to pretty substantially decrease as well. And they've already got it like, I don't know, so like it feels like one of those things where even like the poorer people that manage to own houses around here as well would be pretty unified against. That's why I said it would have to be like a totalitarian government thing.
It would be, and that's why, you know, I always call this a housing crisis, a housing emergency, right? Because if it's an emergency, if it's a crisis, you have to take emergency action. Right. And we cannot pretend that the solution to this problem it's just going to evaporate on its own. Right. We have to have what you were saying, those Swedish high rises that basically have everything inside of them that you can live on. Right. And it's incredible. And we should have more of that. The issue is, like you said, exactly what you said. The homeowners are gonna riot, right? And they're gonna be like, "You just destroyed my livelihood. This isn't okay."
Yeah.
And sadly, we're gonna have to make some really tough decisions, and it's gonna piss off a lot of really affluent, rich people that have owned their land, and most people don't own their land anymore. They don't own their property. So it's a very small minority of people, because if you think about it, how many people would love to move to Glendale? A lot of people would love to live there. It's a beautiful area.
And this is one of my big problems with like policies like rent control, is that the people that it helps are immediately noticeable. Like when we enact like rent control, you see everybody that benefits from it like right away, all the people that get to stay. But you don't see like all the damage it causes when there's no new investment in real estate, and all the people that want to move in can't. And non-rent controlled properties have even higher rents because they're not rent controlled. And it seems like the zoning issue there is so frustrating to me. You don't have, I don't want you to take a strong stance on this, going to hurt you politically. Have you heard of like Proposition 13? Do you have like opinions on stuff like that, or?
I do have opinions on that. I think that we should eliminate it.
That is insane to me, that a family, and it's interesting you said this earlier about like people wanting to live in a place or never wanting their community to change. And maybe this is just maybe I'm too cold for this, but like I always found it kind of absurd, the idea that like not only should you be allowed to live in one place your entire life, but your family and your children's children should always live there. The idea that your property's value could increase so much that you can't afford the taxes on it. I mean, that to me sounds like a good problem to have. Like, I bought a $200,000 house and now it's worth like $1 million and I can't afford the taxes. Time to sell the house and move. Like, that's an okay thing. Yeah. It's insane to me that Prop 13 locks those taxes down.
It does. And it's a huge, I mean, what Prop 13 was the 80s, right? I think that's when it was done. So we got to look at that and be like, wow, that bill, just like everything else in the 80s,
Yeah.
has completely destroyed our communities that we're trying to live in now.
It's literally
And
the opposite of a wealth tax. Like, the
yeah,
more you have in assets, the more you pay. Well, with Prop 13, the more you have in assets, the less is a percentage of those assets you
yeah,
pay in taxes. It's
absolutely.
crazy.
And I'll say about Prop 13, the thing is, like, there's an incrementalist thing happening right now, which if something changes, it's fine,
Hmm.
where they want to split it. Because right now, the craziest thing about Prop 13, other than the obvious reasons that we've been discussing, is that this also counts for commercial property too.
Hmm.
I think that's insane. There are beachside hotels in downtown San Diego right now that are paying pennies on the dollar for their property that an average San Diegan in San Diego is paying more for. Right. And it is gross and egregious. And guess what? Corporations don't die. So they can just keep on keep passing it on, and they're immortal.
Yeah.
So we have to eliminate that like tomorrow,
Yeah.
and that's something that needs to happen. But I also agree that it needs to be extended to private homeowners as
Yeah,
well.
that's gonna be a hard one too, though, because the second you eliminate that, you're gonna have a lot of lower class and even middle class people that are gonna find themselves in a pickle. So it's
But
everyone.
but but like you said, sell your house.
Yeah, but you have to be really careful on that. Like, now, from economically, I agree, and morally, I would agree, but like rhetorically, that sounds really bad, right? Like, just leave the community that you've been in for 20 or 30 years.
Something that just sparked in my mind. Because I like processing out loud. So
Hmm.
you're about to hear it from my brain right now.
Yeah.
Is the idea that maybe the city, once we eliminate Prop 13, or the city or the county or the country, says we're going to pay you twice the market value on your home.
Hmm.
So therefore you can actually say you're going to have a little bit of a nest egg, right?
Hmm.
You're going to be able to, find a nice place, even if you want to rent for a year, waiting for another place,
Yeah.
like to open up that you can purchase. I think people would be very willing to be like, whoa, like my house is valued at $800,000. You're going to pay me double that?
Hmm.
Sure. Sold.
And I
Right.
think it would even benefit. I think even like fiscally, it would be beneficial because you bulldoze it, you move in like 2,000 people or whatever. Based, yeah.
Boom. Exactly. So I think you just sparked this in my mind. I think
Yeah.
that would be a great idea of being able to say, look, we're going to eliminate Prop 13. If it affects you negatively and you can no longer afford your home, the government will compensate you at least maybe 2 times or 1.5 times the value of your home, and then that way you can get back on your feet so you don't go homeless. Right, because that would be the worst thing, right? If people were just like, I can't afford my home, and then all of a sudden they sell it, and then for a rush sell, and then they didn't get the value that they actually deserve for the home, and now they're on the street, right? That's the worst case scenario. So I think if we did that, whenever a company or whenever the government buys a home that way, that it is immediately circled for like rezoning, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, this area, this neighborhood, this block, we want to purchase from the homeowners. They're going to save a mint on taxes, and they're going to make a ton of money and actually get the liquid asset value of what that property is worth.
Yeah.
Because like you said, like people are just sitting on these assets and it's not doing anything for anybody, right?
Yeah.
They're just, so if that person gets a large amount of money from the government, what is that person going to do? They're going to reinvest it in the economy. Right. So it's not like the money's going to go anywhere. Right. It's not like it's just going to go into the bank accounts of these people for them forever to shut it down.
Yeah.
That may be the case. But at the end of the day, those people, those working class people, are going to be able to put that money back into their communities in a very good way.
Yeah.
And it would also be great for the housing market as well, because then it just becomes a buyer's market.
Yeah.
Right. Because so many people are selling.
Yeah.
Right. Or
Yeah.
So that's also a good thing that will drive down house costs, which
Good
is
for new people coming in, but upsetting to the people that live here. It's such a messy.
It's messy, and that's what the housing is. And I think you said it best when we're looking at these people that are living in these houses for generation, and really they're not upset that they're moving. They're just upset that the plan is messed up. Like
Sure.
their plan of what they were trying to do for their grandkid isn't going to be the same. But put it in a college fund, or put it into their next down payment of another house. Like, they're young. They don't need to have the giant mansion that your family's fathers got for you. Like, that's what I mean. Like, I think that ultimately at the end of the day, like, the young people that are going to be getting the assets from those homes are going to be able to get liquid money assets and live where the hell they want. Like, why do we want to live in these communities anyway. Like young people don't want to go in and just live in all these really older communities. Like we want to be able to live where it's hip. We want to live where we can walk to a brewery. We want to, that's what we want. So I just think that we can change the mindset of the American people of what housing looks like if we were to produce some type of form like this. But no, I like this discussion.
Yeah. It's going on to that. Have you traveled internationally before?
Yes, I have. All
Okay.
over.
Where this flows right into the next topic. So my mind, every time I go to Europe, it blows my mind how any little dinky European city I go in, I don't need a car to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I was in London a month ago, and there were two things that I could not believe. There were two ends of the same coin. One, oh my God, there are so many people that are walking on the street. It comparable to New York City. It's crazy how much foot traffic there is. But the crazy part about it was that the streets were like, not that congested.
Right.
Because the public transport is so crazy in London that they're all upset. Like when their bus that comes every 10 minutes is like 4 or 5 minutes late. And it actually like upsets them when the tube is like 2 or 3 minutes late. In America, if you miss your bus, in most communities I've been in, you're out for like 2 hours. Like it's like crazy. How LA has the worst traffic of the world by most metrics that I've seen. Not because the traffic is bad, but because there are no alternatives.
That's right.
How? What do you do?
Well, we need to invest in transit, like mass transit. We need to actually start putting things into rail. We need to stop putting more cars on the road. And this harkens back. I don't know if you know the history of like California freeway systems, but before like the Federal Freeway Commission came into really existence, there was a lot of public transit in these areas. There was rail, there was all of these things. But what they did is instead of expanding on the rail and putting in a road, they were like, let's just put the road over the rail. Like, this is a great corridor. Let's just make it a car corridor. And it kind of like created California to be this freeway type of city state structure that it is.
There are like 30, anytime I drive, so I live in Glendale. If I want to go from Glendale to like Santa Monica or Beverly Hills, there's like 4 or 5 different freeways. There's like, I think the 134, there's like the Glendale freeway, there's the 5, there's the 10, and there's all these like hopping. Yeah, it's really, really weird how many different interstates and freeways I hop between when I go somewhere. It's like, Jesus.
So if you were to think like if those were actual train rail lines, like if they were actually like, above ground or below ground subterranean, rail, like that went under those freeways, like think about how efficient that would be, right? Like you would just go in from one road to another, to another, to another, and then you'd be able to go through the heart of LA very quickly.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is we have to actually have the courage to actually expand our local transit systems and add more rail. We need to add more public busing. We need to expand those type of things. So whenever we build a development, for example, the part of the development cost needs to be how are we going to mass transit these people from point A to point B. So that needs to be a part of the master plan of how we're going to be doing it. And it's going to be plans that we need to set in place that are going to take 10 years to do, right? Like, and actually create the skeleton. Like there are so many plans for San Diego, for example. We also have the same issue where we have very miserable public transit. There really isn't an alternative other than the trolley line, but the trolley doesn't go to every corner of the district or the count, not the district, but not every corner of the county. So it's wildly insufficient. So what we need to do is we need to underground and actually create subterranean rail. We have the equipment, we have the need to actually start doing this. And I don't know if you know about like tunnel building technology now, but like what did the English Channel, for example, and dug underneath that. We can put a machine that goes in and just digs giant tunnels underneath our road, not our roads, but underneath our city very effectively, very easily. So it's not like we don't have the technology to do it. It's just that we don't have the will and taxation that's necessary to do this type of stuff, because people don't want to get out of the cars. And that is that problem. But I know, and I've seen it, when you start putting in high transit corridor areas, people start taking it. I know because like I live in a very transportation friendly area right now in San Diego, which is like in the heart of central San Diego. My son hates getting in the car. He wants to go on the trolley, 100% of the time. He wants to get on a bus 100% of the time. And, and it's really informed us on like what the future can be.
Yeah,
Right.
I was in Warsaw for 3 months, and I could get from any point of that city to any other, more or less, like you, even at night, like using like the
Yeah.
buses and using the trams or whatever. And then in some places, like I think in Seattle, I think they've either banned or made it hard to park in a lot of downtown areas. So it's like if you do drive, it's like really hard to find parking. So you're better off just taxiing or finding other ways to do it. Yeah.
We're doing that here in San Diego in one of North Park here and it is we are actually removing the parking spaces from 30th Street, which is one of the hippest areas of San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And the people around there are very upset because they're just like, I want to park and drive to 30th. And the people in the neighborhoods are just like, no, this is great. Like we can walk and we can bike to that area, and we don't have to worry about the cars drive, because you park all those cars, then you're like forced to walk bike ride on the street. Right. So what people want is they want to create a bike friendly area. And what's interesting is the shop owners kind of want it too, because pedestrians actually walk slower than a car zooming by the road. So like a bicyclist or a walker sees a business ad in a window and they're like, oh, I've never eaten at this restaurant. I'm going to walk in and stop in and say hello and figure out what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of really community benefit to eliminating a lot of these cars as well in these parking spaces, so people can like get used to it. It's like, oh, you're gonna have to lift to 30th, or oh, you're gonna have to take the trolley line and take the bus there, right? Like that's cool to me. I like that, and maybe because I'm close to it and I can just zip up on my bike and go up there, but I like it. It's safer. I can actually like take my kid on a bike ride to 30th, right? That's safe now. Like that's something that I like,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, and I think a lot of residents do as well. The only people who don't are those older, affluent white people that just want to drive from their house to 30th rather than just getting off and walking to that area.
Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of related to what you did earlier. I'm super curious on this. Democrats, historically, it seems, don't, for whatever reason, don't like nuclear energy. You were a nuclear operator on a carrier. Mm-hmm. I feel like you might have other opinions here, or do you agree? What do you think about nuclear energy as a proposed alternative energy?
Yeah, so you asked me this 10 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, nuclear power is the way to go. It's the way you charge and power things at night.
Here we go.
Things like that.
Uh-huh.
However, green technology has gotten so good. We have battery charging technology now. We have, so many effective windmills. We have effective solar panels. We look at what happened in Germany as a big example, right? In Germany, they were building out power plants like crazy, nuclear power plants like crazy. And now because they also, in conjunction with that plan, also did a massive solar panel project on top of all public spaces and private buildings, that it basically overtook the nuclear power strategy, because nuclear power plants are expensive. They create waste. They can be very detrimental to society if they were to have an accident. Now, I'm going to tell you, as a reactor operator, the nuclear accidents are very, very rare, and not common if they're done correctly.
Yeah, and even the horrible accidents, if we compare the death toll of like something like Fukushima with like how many oil and other like types of environmental disasters happen as a result of the fossil fuels we dig up today, it pales in comparison.
It does. It's just that dying from a nuclear accident is so brutal. Like, you're gonna just get tons of cancers and things like that. So it's like you see the slow death of people, and people get freaking terrified. It's like dying in a fire. People don't want to see a bunch of people die in fire, right? So it's like, somebody getting a carcinogen 10 years later from an oil spill is kind of it's like a silent killer, right? You know what I mean? Rather than what is happening at these nuclear power plants. So there is like legitimate fear there, but you are right that our coal plants are creating more asthma and more death of children than our power plants down the road, right? So I do believe that we can use green energies to power our society. I would not have agreed with that 10 years ago. I think technology is catching up, and we have the ability to make everything clean. Nuclear power is something that we can use. I don't know if vehicles are the best way to do that. Not like personal vehicles, but like ships and things of that nature are maybe something we can continue to use, because right now I don't see any electric power plants right now. So as far as like let's say, you know, a ship that is run on green energy. Now there are some technologies that are starting to create that, where like there's wind turbines on top of ships that will power the power plants underneath, which are pretty cool. So I think we can even revamp those type of things. But I will say nuclear power can be safe, can be done well, and can be done effectively. But I think we don't need to be spending the investment on the money that is required, because these power plants are extremely expensive because of all the safety precautions, the lead, all of this. I mean, just think, you can like commonsensically know that these things are expensive.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit, like I know that we talk about batteries and we have made improvements, but it's not there yet for being to like, and the biggest problem with like wind and solar is the unreliability of like what kind of power you'll get out of them. Like if it's not, especially wind is like very susceptible to different weather patterns. It's like, oh well, just no electricity today. So it seems like I'm a fan of like having that strong backup. Like with nuclear, obviously you can spin it up or down based on the demand that you need to meet on the grid and everything, which is nice.
Right. Well, you know, like the wind, like when you say, oh, we don't get power when the wind isn't blowing. If we have, and this shows where we have the ability to charge up battery banks, and when it's time is off, and there's also wind turbines that also have natural gas batteries. I don't know if you know about that, is where like, you know, they actually have natural gas that flips on when you need it. And then natural gas it's still a fossil fuel, but it is a little bit cleaner. And I think like if let's say we have a windmill farm, right? And let's say that 90% of the time there's enough wind and to charge up the battery banks, but for 10% of the time we have to throw on a natural gas battery. It's still much, much better than having to pay for the waste disposal of a nuclear power plant. And, you know, because the waste disposal stuff, we're still dealing with that now. I mean, you know, we have spent fuel rods all over the country that are highly secure and not so highly secure, right? That people can go in and just take it and do whatever they can, right? With the dirty bombs that they are. And there is no viable solution yet to actually dispose of it. I think the most viable solution that I've actually have seen now is, we were talking about technology about drilling holes. Well, one of them is that you just drill a hole about a mile deep into the earth, and you just dump the waste into it in canisters, and then you just bury it, and you never have to worry about it again, at least you know, because the earth is so deep into the earth that we won't really have to play with it, and it's so deep that it doesn't have any radioactive effects. So that is probably the best way to dispose of it, but it's still something that I don't like, the idea of having spent fuel rods and highly contaminated waste, or waste that has a potential to contaminate deeply, just out and about, you know. And that, you know, we live in a world, and you know, I just don't like that concept, and it's super expensive, right? So that's something that I think about as well, is like the post hoc of a reactor. So for example, San Onofre, right down the road from here, up the 5, they that plant is shut down. Like it broke. It's no longer able to be used. But they're still having the fight over, you know, for almost a decade now, 5 years now, well, maybe over a decade, a little bit close to a decade. They've been having the arguments of like, what are you doing with the fuel rods? How are you going to shut this down? Like, you know, and this is right on the coast. You know, they actually buried the spent fuel rods on the beach right next to the water, right? When we have sea level rise coming, you know, so there is that as well, where, you know, once these things don't even produce power, we're still paying the bill, you know, the PG&E, you know, the cost of San Onofre is going straight into the cost of the people who pay for their electricity and gas, and it's just getting pushed to the ratepayer, and we're not getting any benefit from that. So that's something else.
I will say, like, it just is kind of like little defenses of nuclear. Like, even though there is trouble dealing with like the storage of the nuclear waste right now, it is a problem that could theoretically be solved, right? Like Congress is really slow to move on a lot of this because nobody wants to grant a place to store stuff, and also it's very you know, obviously things like solar and wind are very green and very profitable. But then when you point out the idea that it's harder to scale these on demand, people bring up the batteries. But once you start bringing up batteries, your cost per kilowatt hour and your overall like maintenance fees and everything start to increase significantly. Like running a solar panel is one thing. Running a solar panel connected to a grid of batteries, that not only is there a lot of pollution involved in the manufacturing of said batteries, there's also a whole bunch of maintenance costs, upgrade costs, technology that has to be continually improved upon. Like I think we've had nuclear reactors that have been running for 30 or 40 or 50 years or whatever. I imagine as batteries
since the 60s.
as batteries get improved, like that's going to be an additional maintenance cost anytime stuff breaks down. Like I like the idea of solar and wind. Obviously, I really like the idea of solar and wind.
Well, Germany's did it, right? Like and sunny, cloudy isn't really a sunny place, right? So the results do exist. Like Costa Rica, for example, is also like 100% renewable.
Well, to be fair as well, also like even though Germany might have tried it and they don't do it as much, I think they rely mainly on coal now. I think France is a country that I want to say gets like 60% of its power, I think, from nuclear, maybe even more.
Yeah.
Like France gets a significant amount. So, but
they actually export electricity sometimes to other countries.
That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there is, like I said, like nuclear power can be done safely. It can it could be very effective. It's just that I think that we need to spend our resources to develop that technologies that you're talking about. And yeah, they're going to be expensive to develop, but once we get on the groove of things, like I think that it's just going to be business as usual for this is just how society gets its power now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think there's going to be a mind shift on that eventually.
So this is something that's kind of related to this. This is a very hard one. So the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, before this actually, sometimes you run into conflicts. As a progressive, you want to support things like alternative energies, things like the Green New Deal, et cetera, but you also want to support like strong unions and labor unions to be able to negotiate things. Yeah, you know where I'm going. So like Los Angeles was actually sitting on a contract for an insane solar power farm. But the LADWP is obviously not happy with it because they have a lot of jobs that are roped into some of the fossil fuel plants that are still running here. How do you reconcile in our current society, in the current state we're in, how do you reconcile the competing interests here between like your green policies versus labor unions that are representing workers that still work at some of these older plants, that have jobs related to these older plants that are going to be compromised with newer things being brought online?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually got in a pretty heated discussion with the AFL-CIO here in San Diego.
They're another big one that pushes against like the Green New Deal.
Yeah. And because I was doing their labor 101 training inside of a room full of other candidates across the county that were in there. So they brought up a slide. They were talking about, we believe in the Green New Deal and all this type of stuff. So I raised my hand, right, because I'm the progressive in the room, and I'm like, I ask them, I see that you care about the environment. You're talking about the Green New Deal, but I know that the building trades in particular are very against projects that increase a lot of green energy. And we build, instead of building, clean energy, we start building energy that is dirty, or we build buildings that are dirty. And the person is like, well, we got to be able to balance jobs with the technology. And that's usually their argument. And I pushed back and I said, well, can't we do both? Like why can't we create labor jobs in that solar plant? Because the fact of the matter is, it's going to take time to build it. So all the construction workers and all the people that do that type of work are going to build it. You're going to have a lot of electrical journeymen and all those people that are going to need to wire all of it and maintain the power line. So that's going to create stable work for a long time for more electrical workers. You're going to need to do maintenance and all of these things. So we have the ability to retrain and repurpose these people to do this work. So, for example, I was formerly trained on a reactor plant, right? So I know how to boil water with uranium, right? Like that, put it as basic as possible. But that boiling of the water is the thing that happens. I just happen to do it with uranium. Like if I chose to burn it with coal, or boil it with solar, or boil it with whatever way that it needs to do to create that steam plant, I know the basics of a steam plant. Like, I'm going to know how to make sure that that generator is spinning, so that generator can produce electricity at certain amount of voltage to make sure that that is then distributed to all of the power structure, the power needs for ship services or homes or whatever you're doing, right? In the power plant. So generating electricity is a very basic skill set. I mean, it's not like basic as in like anybody can do it, but once you know the knowledge and have the level of knowledge to run a power plant, you're going to be able to run a power plant pretty much anywhere. You're just going to have to learn the difference on how you're generating the energy, right? So we have the ability to retrain these union workers to actually retool their skill set to be more green energy conscious. So there's a lot of short-term thinking when it comes to labor unions, and I understand why. Because if you think about it, they have laborers that are waiting to work at all times, right?
Yeah.
They're always trying to reassign laborers to go work over here, or go work over here, or go work over here. So when a labor union, let's say like the building trades, or go and they solidify a contract that will make sure this many jobs are being done. It doesn't matter if it's jobs for a week. It doesn't matter if it's, for a short period of time. They're always going to go with that job that produces the most amount of work, even if it's for a short time, just so they can say, hey, look, we are getting you a job. Our labor union is being successful at what it does. And they care more about their reputation of being able to get more workers to work, rather than the long-term workers that are going to be working on these projects for the long term. So I think that the labor unions can be a little short-sighted sometimes, especially when it comes to green energy technology.
Sure.
But I think that it's not a zero-sum game. I don't think that if you build a solar farm, you're going to immediately lay off all the people who worked at the other plant. Like, you're going to be able to like say, hey, let's go talk to those people and see if they want to learn a new skill or new trade. Pay them to learn that new skill, learn that new trade, right? Like, let's build in a labor fallout cost, where it's like, oh, all these people that lose their jobs, we'll give them a short 4-month pension to paid by for the city, to make sure that they don't fall into tough times, so they can continue to feed their family, and then allow them to find new work. Right? Even if it's up to a year, because if the city is making a decision that is going to affect laborers, there's no reason the city can't brace for that impact, right? And make sure that they can help those workers from not falling into poverty and ultimately hurting themselves, right? And that's kind of the way I look at it. I think we can do both.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I have this written down. This is a final question. This is a really unpopular thing. I don't know if you've heard about this. Have you heard anything about like the state of funding of the IRS?
Yes, I have. I have heard about it.
I'm only bringing this up because I know like Warren has proposed a wealth tax, Bernie has proposed the FTT. But I'm kind of aware of like the state of the IRS in general is pretty bad right now, and obviously nobody wants to support it because nobody wants to be the guy that's like, we need to fund the IRS.
Right. So studies show like for what we fund for the IRS, we get much money back. Well, I mean, more money back than what we put into it. The IRS is just doing its job to basically provide services for the American people, so they can talk to somebody about if their taxes are due and they have an issue with them, or all of these things. Like, if you defund the IRS, it allows people to evade taxes, actually evade taxes, right? And so we're losing money from people evading taxes because we have no ability to police, because we've underfunded it so much. I do believe that we need to bring it's very simple. So look at it this way. You go to the director of the IRS, right? The person who's in charge of the IRS. They could probably tell you by the dollar how much money they need to operate at 100% efficiency. All we got to do as a Congress is to take that recommendation and approve it.
And whatever you send them for money, they'll more than make up for it. There's like billions of dollars that exist right now in tax revenue that they just don't have the resources to go after
and collect. So what we need to do is say, and it's just a simple balance sheet, right? You can just say, all right, director of IRS, how much money do you need? This much. Okay, if we gave you this much money, how much money would that produce? Oh, it'll produce billions. Oh, it looks like if we just give the IRS a couple $1 billion and they're going to give us a couple hundred back in return, that sounds like an easy, fiscally, responsible thing to do. So I think if we made that argument to the American people, I think they would feel much more confident about it, because I think that people think that if we defund the IRS, then your taxes are going to go down. That's not how it works. We need to re-educate people to let them know that government agencies provide a service and a job for us. And if we underfund them, they don't do the job for us.
Yeah.
So it's just basic governmental functioning. It's like political science 101, right? Or 102, I guess would be more effective. But just making sure that if you have a government agency, make it effective. Because if you don't have effective government agencies, it just continues to stoke up distrust of government taxation to fund agencies. And that's the whole purpose. That's why the Republicans have been fighting against the IRS for decades now, defunding it every year. And the reason they're doing that is because they can say, oh, look how terrible the IRS is. Let's defund it more. Right. And that is a very short-sighted way of thinking. And we just need to bring education to the American people.
Sure.
And let them know that. So it's controversial, but it's simple. Yeah.
Okay. I guess maybe it's like a final, like a meme question, because I'm super curious.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, some news just got released on this like 20 minutes ago.
Oh, wow. What's happened?
Apparently, William Taylor, the envoy to Ukraine, testified that Trump tied Ukraine aid to politically motivated investigations. So basically saying there was a quid pro quo. Do you see this? Do you see this playing out at all, or do you have any strong opinions on like what's going to happen?
Well, I've had strong opinions about the impeachment inquiry for years now. Like, well, not for a year, I guess, since my campaign. Because I think that what he's doing with the emoluments clause of allowing people to come in.
I think we just forgot about that.
I know, right?
I don't know how. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, even Mick Mulvaney said publicly, it's like, I know we're breaking constitutional law. What are you going to do about it? Right? Like, they know that, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at these quid pro quos and you look at all this stuff, the strength of these arguments are only as strong as the backbones of the Democrats who are in charge of the House right now. And right now, it's slam dunk. Like, now with this news, it's just more verifiable evidence to the fact that Trump admitted it himself, that he committed a complete crime against this country, right? Like, it's so clear. Now, if I was in Congress, I would be one of those people. It's like, it's our constitutional duty to hold Trump accountable. And then I would have been saying this for a long time already. And for me, it's like, why can't we just let the governmental powers that exist in our country, that is endowed to us by the Constitution, that we just hold him accountable and just put him on trial? It's very simple, right? And then we can have a vote on it and get it over. Now, do I believe that the removal of Trump is going to solve all our problems? No. The Trump is just a symptom. Of a much larger, deeper problem. And now a lot of that is the corruption of the party system, Republican and Democrat, right? That has allowed this continual establishment wheel to keep flying, right? So do we need to impeach Trump? Yes, because it's a moral imperative to our Constitution and the strength of our Constitution. Because if we are not using constitutional tools that are given to us, then what's the point of even following it in the first place? So me, I look at it as more of a moral imperative. As far as if I look at it like at the political strategist level, will an impeachment of Trump help our voter base? Yeah, I think it would. I think people would be more excited to know that, wow, the Democrats are actually doing something. Wow, give them an applause. Like, let's fight, right? I think that that's going to generate a lot of more motivation for Democrats. And if we just sit back and do nothing, I think American people are going to be like, it doesn't matter who we elect in office. They're going to support him regardless of what happens. Because the every day that Nancy Pelosi drags her feet is another day that she's disappointing the American people.
Sure. I just hope we don't have another that Mueller testimony was really bad.
It was.
I hope we don't do a repeat of that closer to an election season, because God.
And that's the problem, is like, we could have dealt with this 2 years ago. Like, and now what we've done is, because we've dragged our feet for so long, Now it's getting closer and closer to election cycle. I mean, the primary is a little over 4 months away from here in the state of California, right? March 3rd. And we're now starting to be like, oh, let's do the impeachment, because that's really frustrating for me as a candidate, because everybody at the door is going to ask me about impeachment, right? And rather than talking about the issues. But because our leadership decided to drag their feet, now they made it like the worst possible time. And I don't like that. I don't like that. But again, my love for the Constitution and our moral obligation and our fiduciary agreement as members of Congress, we have to do the job. We have to do what it says we have to do.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to leave any strong messages or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, Stephen. I really, really appreciate it. Love talking to your audience. And, I want everybody to go to my website, joseforcongress.us, and take a look. And if you like what we have to say, donate. Because I'll tell you right now, the establishment forces are pushing really hard down on us right now. And the billionaires, the one that can just write herself a check for $5 million, she thinks she can just buy this seat. And one of the things that people in this district are saying the most is, oh, Jose's not viable. He can't raise enough money. And that is such a BS argument, because I'm still walking. I'm still talking to people like yourself. I'm still going out there into the community and making a difference. And that's why my name recognition is so high. So we're going to continue to fight this campaign. But the difference is, every dollar that you donate to our campaign goes to the doorstep. So it costs us, because of my consulting company, I don't have to pay a consultant like myself to do the work. I can actually knock one door for $1. That's how powerful it is. Like, not just me, but my campaign. And that's a $15 an hour paid worker, t-shirt, door hanger, and a yard sign. So what we are able to accomplish is much more powerful at the grassroots. And all we need is a small amount of money. Right? A small amount of money. So if everybody here were to give me like $5, right? Then that would be incredible. I would actually be able to take this message to the doorstep more effectively and scare the hell out of the establishment, right? Because that's what we need to do. We need to let these people know that just because you were elected to a city council seat at some point doesn't make you automatically qualified to run this seat. To be in the seat. Just because you're a billionaireess that worked for the Hillary campaign and Hillary, stuff, does not mean that you are ready to run this seat. So we have to stand up and say, we are going to run because it's our right to run, because we cannot be intimidated. And I'm unbossed and unbought. Right. I've had people come up to me all the time. Well, not all the time. I've had 2 people come up to me and tell me to run in the district that the council president is leaving. And I felt dirty afterwards, because they were saying, oh, she will endorse you if you do it. And for me, I'm just like, that's disgusting. Like, what is this? Is this like musical chairs? No, this is something that matters. And if we actually want to have real people that are going to hold these people accountable, then we need to make sure that we support candidates like myself that are going to be going to Congress with a clear goal and intention to actually fight for our values, rather than the billionaire class and rather than the establishment class, because the establishment class got us where we are and the billionaires are trying to make it worse. And that's what we have to fight and stand up for. And this is a 3-way race. So if there's 12 people who are running now, it's freaking insane, but it will be going to top 2 Democrats. So if you want to see me in the top 2, we got to start ponying up. We got to start giving. And because I can't do my job effectively without the support from people like your audience, right? Because this is our base. This is who we're talking to take the time to speak with you, Stephen, is like something that a progressive would do, right? Like, this isn't something, you're not going to get Sarah Jacobs. You're not going to get Georgette to come
calm
and
down.
talk about it.
But no, I know what you mean. Yeah, for sure.
But anyways, what I mean is they're going to be too afraid to talk to you. That's what I mean. You know what I mean? I think I would love to see it happen because I would love to see you rip her apart. But that's where I'm at. So I really appreciate it. I'm an unapologetic progressive that's fighting for veteran rights, and we're gonna stop all the wars. We didn't even get to talk about that, because I want to stop all the wars as well, because endless wars are killing us. So but yeah, so that's my little pitch.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, hope we'll probably get to talk again in the future at some point. So,
Yeah, let's do it. I'm always happy to do it. If you have some controversial issue that you want to talk about, you know, I'm more than willing to just come up, set up, and do this with you.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Good luck with
Thank
your
you so
campaign.
much.
I got your Twitter and everything linked. Yeah, thanks a lot
All
for
right.
joining us.
And the website, right?
Yep.
The website.
Got it.
Awesome. Awesome.
right.
Thank you so much.
Have a
I
good one.
appreciate you.
Yep. Bye.
All right, you too.
You could choose like a really important domestic issue. Do you think there's like an important domestic issue that we don't talk about enough, like in our national political discourse? Is there some